Alright, we are going to make some tortillas. I'm going to do about half of my normal recipe, which makes 8 to 12 tortillas, just because I'm only cooking dinner for Andy and I tonight. So that's going to be a cup and a half of gluten-free flour. And I like to use Namaste gluten-free flour mix. It's going to be a half a tablespoon or a drizzle of olive oil. And the same with honey. I only have 1 tablespoon, so I have to measure everything out. If you measure your olive oil in your tablespoon first and then your honey, everything will come out very nicely, which is handy. And then I'm going to do a half a cup of hot water. When you're making these with gluten-free flour, it's pretty important that the water is relatively hot. And I usually do a little bit more than a half a cup because you usually need a little more water than that. So I'm going to mix it until it starts to get crumbly like this. And then what I do is I add about a tablespoon or a half a tablespoon of hot water at a time from there until it gets to the point where it's nice and where it's a nice sticky dough. So not quite there yet, sticking to the spoon nicely, but not sticking together quite the way that I want it to. The key with either gluten-free or regular tortillas is to get a nice sticky dough, but it's especially key for gluten-free stuff. That's getting there. That it stays nice and moist. So I'll just scrape it off my spoon. And then I'm going to take just a tad bit of olive oil in my hands. And kind of knead it together. Like so. So it's nice and moist. You get some olive oil on it, it will keep it from sticking to other things. And then, especially for your gluten-free dough, you want to either cover it with a wet tea towel or cover it with something else that's going to hold the moisture in, because it's really important that it stays moist. So I'm going to rinse my hands off here, and then I will show you how to roll things out. Alright, so I like to start with a ball of dough that's a little bit thicker or a little bit bigger than a golf ball size. And I just make sure it's coated nicely in flour. That's really important with the gluten-free recipe. And then you just keep flipping and rolling. Until it gets nice and thin. So it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. And it's actually pretty easy to work with. And then I can take this and put it straight in my skillet. Okay, the last thing I wanted to show you guys with these tortillas is, whoops, I just stuck my finger through that, trying to lift it up with one hand and just pat it back together. Baking them on a skillet. You want to use a plain skillet. I like cast iron a lot. And you don't want it to have any, you don't want it to have any oil or grease on it of any kind. And the flour, you'll kind of notice, will start to burn on the skillet after a little while. And I just push it off to the side after a tortilla or two. But when you are baking these things, I usually do it on a medium heat, medium low, medium heat, so like between a 3 and a 4. And what you're looking for, you can see it starting to happen now. When it's ready to flip, it'll start to bubble up. So you can see like a little bubble in here. And then you know you can just take it and flip it. And you'll see it bubble up again. So you can see those bubbles forming. And that's why you get those little like brown spots on a tortilla. And you're gonna leave it, really once it bubbles, it's ready to flip, and then you can leave it on the second side literally for like 30 seconds, and then it's ready to take off. And with the gluten-free tortillas, it's also very important that you keep them covered so that they maintain their foldability. So I just put them in a tortilla warmer. Sometimes I'll put like a wet paper towel in there too. But that'll keep them nice and moldable, like you can actually fold them and bend them without them breaking that way. Whoops, stuck there a little bit. Maybe a slightly wonky one. It's going to be a very wonky one. Let's try that again. 2. I just realized I forgot for this recipe, you're literally just going to use a pinch of salt. And I just realized I forgot it. So this video is not going to be perfect tortilla tutorial, but it will be good enough. It will get the job done.